escoja los tres puntitos que dicen más y luego escoja interpretación y luego ahí escoja español. Muchas gracias, bienvenidos a todos y ahora le paso.
Yes, hello to all of you, dear ladies and gentlemen, excellencies and friends. The reason why we convoke today this EIR Roundtable Special Seminar in coincidence with the IPC meeting is because obviously we have arrived at a very crucial strategic crossroad, and humanity can go in either one of two fundamentally different directions. There is a hopeful one. I think that was hinted at in the state visit of President Trump in China, where he was warmly received by President Xi Jinping, and they agreed to improve the relationship among the two largest economies in the world, working to the mutual benefit and solve all problems through negotiations and diplomacy, guided by Xi Jinping's conception that we have a shared future of mankind, that we have only one future as a human species. The other one is the path of escalation, which in the very short term could lead to a global nuclear war and the annihilation of the human species. It is very clear that if the war, the unprovoked war of aggression against Iran, is going to continue, that we are facing the danger of the whole world economy plunging into a deep depression, leading to chaos and potentially a dark age. I should also mention that there is also the policy of the coalition of the willing, basically saying the war with Russia is inevitable, but that is a feature of today. Now, the Pentagon says that the cost of the first 60 days of the war was 25 billion. Now, we calculated that the actual cost is more 100 times that, namely 4 trillion, if you count everything, the military cost, the energy price, the fertilizer price, the reduction in production in industrial and agricultural output, the destruction of civilian infrastructure and assets. So where do we go from here? Well, first of all, the US and Israel have not accomplished one of the goals set. They have neither succeeded to decapitate the Iranian leadership. They have not eliminated the nuclear or ballistic missile capability. They have not been able to cut the link to the forces of resistance. And the whole world is not missing the point that the strongest military force on earth was not able to defeat a middle-sized country. Also, the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before, is now basically under the control of Iran, who have set up a toll booth system. So the options now we are looking at are the following. First, if the United States keeps the blockade against Iran, the time factor works very clearly against the United States because Iran will be more resilient, and Trump is already losing his own MAGA base, and he has to think about the upcoming midterm election. So therefore, this is not in the advantage of Trump. The Wall Street Journal proposes a second option, namely to have the continuation of the blockade plus resume the bombing. Now, that in all likelihood also will lead to a situation where Iran will be able to withstand. And according to even Western media reports, Iran still has 90% of its missile sites, while the US arsenal is almost depleted. 1,100 long-range stealth cruise missiles have been deployed, and that is almost the total supply of what the United States had. 1,000 tokamak, which is about 10 times what the Pentagon is able to produce per year, has been used up, and they even had to divert weapons from Asia, which obviously weakens the focus on the Pacific, which according to various doctrines, was the priority. Now, there is also then the possibility that Iran, if the bombing resumes, will retaliate, and that will have enormous costs, not only for the US bases in the region, but also in the countries which are hosting those US bases, whose business model in any case has been, if not totally destroyed, severely damaged. The third option is that Iran, that Trump tries to get a deal with Iran, which is probably in his interest, because Trump is looking for an off-ramp. But there speaks against the fact that both the Israelis and the Israel lobby in the United States do not want a deal with Iran under any circumstances, because they regard, for reasons true or not, Iran as an existential threat to Israel. However, there is a discussion right now in the IDF and also in the intelligence services in Israel that the present policies, if continued, represent a very real threat to the existence of Israel. Now, we should also consider that while Trump is now, sounding more, peaceful, only a few weeks ago, he did threaten the complete annihilation of the entire Iranian civilization. In any case, if option 1 or 2 would be pursued, the danger is that the world economy plunges into a depression, which would lead to famine, chaos, a dark age like the 14th century. And already now the World Food Program is saying that as a result, as of now, 45 million more people are in acute hunger than before. Now, this is why we strongly, strongly want to put the idea of a new security and development architecture on the table, which must take into account the interest of every single country on the planet for it to succeed. Now, the danger is that, if you look at the Iran situation, if it escalates, has the danger of nuclear weapons. The fact that the coalition of the willing already 3 times, or the Anglo-Americans 3 times, assisted the Ukrainians to cross red lines against Russia, 1 time in the territorial invasion in Kursk, the 2nd time in the attack on the one leg of the strategic triad of Russia, and the 3rd time when they attempted a decapitation against Putin by attacking his residence, which was denied by Western media, but Russia has provided video materials proving the case, to which Soviet analyst and strategic expert Karaganov has answered, proposed that Russia should use a couple of nuclear weapons against the Europeans, so that they remember the fact that Russia is the strongest nuclear power on the planet. So if you take these 2 immediate dangers, and there is no such thing, in my view, contrary to what Karaganov is saying, no limited nuclear war is possible. The eminent expert Ted Postol has declared in many presentations why the use of only 1 nuclear weapon within a matter of 5 days would lead to a global nuclear war. This is why we think that the world must move in a completely different direction, put a new paradigm on the table, and that is in the tradition of the Peace of Westphalia, that you have to consider the interest of the other, and in this case, of all others. Now, the concept we propose is peace through development. This is an old idea which first was promoted by Pope Paul VI in his encyclica of 1967, Populorum Progressio, which says that every nation must be allowed to fulfill its entire interest. I have proposed 10 principles how such a discussion could be taken into account. It's essentially making the World Land Bridge the concept of development for all continents. For Africa, it would mean joint investments by the West and the BRICS countries into the development of Africa according to the Africa 2063 plan. And we propose the extended OASIS plan for Southwest Asia, because if you look at the map of Southwest Asia, you will see that it's all desert. Therefore, we propose an approach to take the entire region from India to the Mediterranean, from the Caucasus to the Gulf, and build a system of canals, starting with a canal from the Mediterranean to the Dead Sea, use space technology to find underground lakes and aquifers, use the ionization of moisture in the atmosphere, and essentially replicate what China just a few days ago published with a spectacular video called How China Turned Barren Desert into Massive Farmland Producing Millions of Tons of Food. We will make the link to this video available. It basically shows the absolute spectacular transformation of Xinjiang and the northwest of China into farmland, into forests, into orchids, producing 30 billion tons of food. So we propose a system of corridors connecting the existing CPEC corridor from China to Pakistan and the north-south transport corridor from St. Petersburg to India, and connect it from Iran to Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Israel, Palestine, and finally Egypt, and that way make Southwest Asia again the hub between Asia and Africa and Europe, as it used to be during the time of the ancient Silk Road. Now, we want to campaign for this program because it appeals to what Dr. Pandor called once the adults in the room in all nations. And, it does require a change in attitude of thinking. We have to abandon the idea of geopolitics, the idea that there is a legitimate interest of one nation or a group of nations against another group of nations. And we have to replace that with love for mankind, without which I think we will not be able to come out of this crisis. But since we are the only creative species known in the universe so far, and therefore are capable of thinking in terms of the coincidence of opposites of Nicolaus of Cruz, that we can recognize that the only way how we will get out of this crisis is to recognize that the one has a higher magnitude than the many. The one humanity is more important than the local national interest of groups, and that, we can actually, by acting forcefully and courageously, change the destiny of history in a better direction for a shared future of humanity.
Dear friend, greetings and regards. Thank you very much for inviting me. I truly appreciated it. خانم ها و آقایان، اساتید، اندیشمندان،
Dear friends, thank you for inviting me.
مایلم سخنان خود را با یک واقعیت انکارپذیر آغاز کنم.
Permítame comenzar
Allow
con
me to
una
begin with an
realidad.
undeniable
در
reality.
جهان به هم پیوسته امروز هیچ جنگ بزرگی محدود به مرزهای جغرافیایی باقی نمیماند. جنگ تنها شهرها و زیرساختها را ویران نمی کند، بلکه اقتصاد جهانی، امنیت غذایی، محیط زیست، میراث فرهنگی و حتی ثبات روانی جامعه بین‌المللی را نیز متأثر می‌سازد.
En el mundo
In
interconectado de
today's
hoy,
interconnected
una
world,
gran guerra
no major
permanece
war
limitada a
remains
sus
limited to
fronteras
geographic
internas.
borders.
La guerra no solo
War
destruye
does not only
civilidades y
destroy
territorios,
cities
sino
and
también
infrastructure,
daña la
it
economía
also
global,
damages the
la
global
seguridad
economy, food
alimentaria,
security,
el medio
the
ambiente,
environment,
el patrimonio
cultural
cultural e
heritage,
incluso la
and even the
estabilidad y
psychological
prosperidad
stability of
de
the
la comunidad
international
internacional.
community.
ما امروز دیگر درباره یک جنگ احتمالی سخن نمیگوییم. ما درباره جنگی سخن میگوییم که در 28 فوریه 2026 آغاز شد و حدود 40 روز منطقه و جهان را در التهاب فرو برد. جنگی که نشان داد هزینه تقابل نظامی در قرن 21 بسیار فراتر از میدانهای نبرد است.
Hoy ya no estamos hablando de
Today,
una posible
we're no
guerra,
longer
estamos
speaking about a
hablando de una
possible
guerra
war.
que
We are
comenzó el
speaking about a war that
24 de febrero
began
de
on February
2026,
28,
que durante
2026,
casi
and for
40
nearly
días
40 days
mantuvo a la
placed the
región y
region
el
and the world
mundo
under
bajo
severe
fuerte
tension.
presión. Fue una
It
guerra
was
que
a war
demostró que
that
el costo
proved
de los
that the
conflictos
cost of
militares
military
en el siglo
conflict in the
XXI va
21st
mucho más
century
allá del
goes far
campo de
beyond the
batalla.
battlefield.
حمله نظامی آمریکا و اسرائیل علیه ایران نه تنها یک بحران منطقه‌ای بلکه شوکی کم سابقه به اقتصاد جهانی وارد کرد. این جنگ به سرعت بازارهای انرژی، حمل و نقل، تجارت جهانی و بازارهای مالی را تحت تاثیر قرار داد و آثار آن از بورس‌های بین‌المللی تا زندگی روزمره مردم عادی در مقاطعان احساس شد.
El ataque militar de Estados
The
Unidos
military
e
attack by the
Irán
United
no fue
States and
solo
Israel
una
against
crisis
Iran
regional,
was not only a
sino que
regional
provocó
crisis,
un
it
fuerte
also
impacto
created a
en la
major
economía
shock
mundial.
to the
El
global
conflicto
economy.
afectó
The conflict quickly
directamente
affected
los
energy
mercados
markets,
financieros, el
transportation,
transporte, el
international
comercio
trade,
internacional y
and
los
financial
mercados
markets.
financieros. Sus
Its effects were felt everywhere, from global stocks exchanges to the daily lives of ordinary people all around the world.
ایران به دلیل موقعیت ژئوپلیتیکی خود و نقش حیاتی تنگه هرمز یکی از ارکان اصلی امنیت انرژی جهان محسوب می شود. بخش مهمی از صادرات نفت و گاز جهان از این مسیر عبور می کند. با آغاز جنگ و افزایش ناامنی در منطقه، بازار جهانی انرژی با بحرانی جدی روبرو شد و قیمت نفت در مدت کوتاهی جهش چشمگیری پیدا کرد.
Irán, debido a su posición geopolítica,
Iran, because of its geopolitical position and the strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz, Iran plays a key role in global energy security. A large part of the world's oil and gas exports passes through this area. When the war began and insecurity increased in the region, the global energy market faced a serious crisis, and oil prices rose sharply in a very short period of time.
اما مسئله تنها افزایش قیمت نفت و بنزین نبود. افزایش بهای انرژی موجب بالا رفتن هزینه حمل و نقل جهانی شد. از کشتیرانی و حمل کالا گرفته تا صنعت هواپیمایی و تجارت بین المللی. در نتیجه قیمت مواد غذایی، دارو، کالاهای اساسی و خدمات در بسیاری از کشورها افزایش یافت. کشورهای در حال توسعه و جوامع آسیب پذیر بیشترین فشار را تحمل کردند و خطر ناامنی غذایی و کمبود کالاهای اساسی در برخی مناطق جهان افزایش یافت.
But
the problem was not only the rise in oil and gasoline prices. Higher energy prices also increased the cost of global transportation, from shipping and trade to aviation and supply chains as well. As a result, the prices of food, medicine, basic goods, and services increased in many countries. Developing countries and vulnerable populations suffered the most, while the risk of food insecurity and shortages of essential goods increased in different parts of the world.
این جنگ نشان داد که اقتصاد جهانی تا چه حد شکننده و به ثبات منطقه خاورمیانه وابسته است. در حوزه اقتصاد واقعی و فیزیکی نیز خسارت‌ها گسترده بود. زیرساخت‌های حیاتی، مراکز صنعتی، تأسیسات انرژی، شبکه‌های حمل و نقل و بخش‌هایی از زیرساخت‌های غیر نظامی آسیب دیدند. زنجیره‌های تأمین جهانی مختل شد و بازارهای مالی با موجی از نااطمینانی، فرار سرمایه و کاهش اعتماد سرمایه‌گذاران مواجه شد.
Esta guerra mostró
This war,
cuán frágiles realmente
it showed us how fragile the global economy really is, and just how much international stability depends on peace in the Middle East. The damage to the real physical economy were also severe. Important infrastructure, industrial centers, energy facilities, transportation networks, and civilian structures were damaged. Global supply chains were disrupted, and financial markets faced uncertainty, capital flight, and declining investor confidence.
طبق برآوردهای اقتصادی، هزینه‌های مستقیم و غیر مستقیم این جنگ برای امریکا ده‌ها میلیارد دلار بود. فشار بر بودجه نظامی، افزایش هزینه انرژی، نوسانات بازار و تشدید تورم بار سنگینی بر اقتصاد آمریکا تحمیل کرد. تجربه این جنگ بار دیگر نشان داد که حتی قدرت‌های بزرگ نیز از پیامدهای اقتصادی جنگ‌های گسترده مسئول نیستند.
According to economic estimates, the direct and indirect costs of this war for the United States reached tens of billions of dollars. Pressure on the military budget, higher energy costs, market instability, and rising inflation have created a heavy burden on the American economy. This war once again showed that even major powers are not protected from the economic consequences of large-scale conflicts.
هزینه‌های نظامی، اختلال در فعالیت اقتصادی، کاهش سرمایه‌گذاری، افت گردشگری و فشارهای امنیتی آثار قابل توجهی بر اقتصاد و جامعه اسرائیل بر جا گذاشت.
Israel also suffered serious losses: military expenses, economic disruption, lower investment, a decline in tourism, and growing security pressures all had major effects on its economy and society.
ایران نیز با خسارت‌های گسترده انسانی و اقتصادی روبرو شد. زیرساخت‌ها، تأسیسات اقتصادی و زندگی روزمره مردم آسیب دید، اما در عین حال این جنگ یک واقعیت مهم را آشکار ساخت: هیچ بحران پیچیده منطقه‌ای از مسیر جنگ و ویرانی حل نخواهد شد.
Iran too faced serious human and economic losses. Infrastructure, economic facilities, and the daily lives of millions of people were affected. Yet this war revealed one important truth: no complex regional crisis can truly be solved through war and destruction.
خانم‌ها و آقایان، در کنار خسارت‌های اقتصادی، جهان با آسیب‌هایی روبرو شد که شاید هرگز به طور کامل قابل جبران نباشد.
Damas y caballeros,
Ladies and gentlemen, alongside the economic damage, the world also witnessed losses that may never be fully repaired.
محیط زیست منطقه آسیب دید. آلودگی آب‌های خلیج فارس، آتش‌سوزی‌های گسترده، انتشار مواد آلاینده و تخریب اکوسیستم‌ها پیامدهایی هستند که تنها به امروز محدود نمی‌شوند و نسل‌های آینده را نیز تحت تاثیر قرار خواهند.
The regional environment suffered greatly. Pollution in the Persian Gulf, fires, toxic materials, and damage to ecosystems are not problems limited to today. They will also affect future generations. In addition, Iran is one of the oldest centers of human civilization. Its historical and cultural sites are part of the shared heritage of all humanity. Threats against Iranian cultural heritage, from Persepolis and Pasargadae to Naqsh-e-Jahan Square and other UNESCO sites were not only threats against one nation, but against the historical and cultural memory of mankind.
شاید مهمترین درس این جنگ آن باشد که ادامه مسیر تقابل و نظامیگری میتواند جهان را وارد مرحله خطرناک از رکود و افسردگی اقتصادی جهانی کند، بحرانی که کنترل و مهار آن بسیار دشوار خواهد بود.
Damas y caballeros,
Ladies and
quizá la
gentlemen,
lección más
perhaps the
importante de
most
esta
important
guerra
lesson of
sea
this
que
war
continuar
is
por el
that
camino
continuing the path
de
of
la
confrontation
confrontación y el
and
militarismo
militarism
podría
could
empujar
push the
al
world
mundo
towards a
hacia
dangerous
un
period of
peligroso
global
periodo
recession
de
and
recesión
economic
global y
depression.
depresión económica,
And that would be
una
a crisis that would be
extremadamente
extremely
difícil
difficult to
de
control.
controlar. Si las guerras, las
If
sanciones
wars,
y la
sanctions,
inestabilidad
and
se
instability
convierten en la
become the
tendencia
dominant trend
dominante
in
de las
international relations,
internacionales, la
the
economía
world
mundial
economy
enfrentará
will
inflación,
face long-term
inflación
inflation,
prolongada, menor
lower
inversión,
investment,
interrupción
disruption of
del
trade,
comercio, aumento de la
rising
deuda
public debt,
pública y un
and growing
crecimiento
poverty
de la
and
pobreza
inequality.
y la desigualdad. Tal
Such a
situación
situation
amenazaría no
would
solo la
threaten
seguridad
not only
económica,
economic
sino
security,
también la
but also
estabilidad social
social
y
and
política
political
en todo
stability
el mundo.
around the world.
Permítame destacar
Allow
un
me
punto
to
clave.
highlight one important point.
Imaginen dónde podría estar hoy
Imagine where the world could be
si
today
en lugar de la
if,
guerra
instead
y
of war
la
and
confrontación, se
confrontation,
hubiera
the
elegido
path
el
of
camino
dialogue
del
and peace
diálogo y la paz.
had been
Si el
chosen.
presidente Trump,
If
en
President
lugar
Trump,
de fomentar
instead
la
of
escalada
encouraging
militar,
military
hubiera
escalation,
apoyado
had supported
negociaciones,
lasting
diálogos y
negotiations
soluciones
and diplomatic
diplomáticas, miles
solutions,
de millones de
billions of
dólares
dollars
gastados en
spent on
armas y
weapons and
destrucción
destruction
podrían
could have been
haberse
invested
invertido
in
en
economic
desarrollo
development,
económico, lucha contra la
fighting
pobreza,
poverty,
educación,
education,
atención médica,
healthcare, scientific
innovación
innovation,
y cambio
and
climático.
climate change.
En ese caso, los
In that
mercados
case,
globales
global
habrían
markets would have
confiado
enjoyed greater
en
stability,
mayor estabilidad,
as
los
well
precios
as
de la
the
energía
fact that
se
energy
habrían
prices
mantenido
would
bajo
have remained
control,
under
el
control,
comercio
international
internacional hubiera
trade would have
sufrido
suffered
menos
less
daño y
damage,
la economía
and the world
mundial no
economy
estaría
would not be
enfrentando
facing this
nivel
level of
de
uncertainty
incertidumbre
and
y
anxiety.
La paz no es
Peace
solo un
is not
valor,
only
la
a
paz
moral
es una
value.
necesidad
Peace
estratégica
is a
y
strategic and
económica
economic
para la
necessity
protección
for the
de la
survival of
para la
humanity.
supervivencia de la humanidad. Hoy la comunidad
Today,
internacional se
the international
encuentra
community stands
ante una
before
elección
a
histórica,
historic
continuar
choice
el ciclo
to
de
continue
guerras
this
y
cycle of
crisis o
wars and
avanzar hacia el
crises,
diálogo.
or to
La
move toward
cooperación
dialogue,
multilateral,
multilateral
el desarrollo
cooperation,
y la
mutual
seguridad
respect,
colectiva.
and collective
Creemos
security.
que el futuro de la
We
humanidad
believe that the
no
future of
será
humanity
decidido
will not be
por
decided
misiles y
by
guerras,
missiles and
sino
wars,
por la
but by wisdom,
sabiduría, la cooperación y el
cooperation,
diálogo
and
entre las
dialogue among
naciones. Muchas
nations.
gracias por su
Thank you very
Muchas
much for your
gracias.
attention. Thank you.
خیلی اسپانیش کنه،
Now I am. Thank you for that introductory words and greetings to all participants. It's an honor to follow such eloquent contributions that have already been made to our roundtable. I want to stress in opening my remarks the dangers that are uniquely revealed by this war of aggression against Iran. And it should not be forgotten that it is a war of aggression and that the peace should not be dictated by the aggressor. That is not a feasible outcome. Trump's diplomacy has consistently tried to turn disaster into a geopolitical victory of sorts by threats of unlimited devastation. He did this already in relation to Iran and could revive that kind of bullying geopolitics. This is something new. Beyond militarist geopolitics is this phenomenon of bullying countries of less capabilities and vulnerable to military devastation. A leading example is turning Israel's genocide in Gaza into a diplomacy that rewards the genocide, the perpetrator of genocide, and punishes further its victims while the underlying ordeal persists. So that in addition to the dangers that have already been vividly depicted, is the danger of having this most powerful actor, political actor in the world system under the autocratic control of a leader of demonstrated mental instability. The mercurial shifts of tone and policy are really an independent source of fear for the future of humanity when such an individual is entrusted with sole access to whether or not nuclear weapons will be threatened or even used. This should be an intolerable situation for the entire world. And to look away from it because one feels helpless to deal with it is irresponsible on the part of both the publics of the world and even more so the governmental authorities. And the UN has shown its helplessness before such diplomatic abuses by unanimously endorsing this so-called Board of Peace that was established to bring a Israeli political defeat into a diplomatic outcome of rewarding genocide, as I suggested. The Iran situation is one where the whole discourse in the United States shifted from the debate over initiating an aggressive war to whether this was a prudent war of choice. The idea that countries have the choice of war as a foreign policy option is an unconditional denial of the relevance of international law and of the whole idea at Nuremberg that a crime against the peace is the ultimate crime in international life, with all of the adverse consequences that have already been noted in our roundtable. And one should remember the admonition of the prosecutor at Nuremberg, Justice Jackson, the chief U.S. prosecutor, who said in his closing statement that the justice that is imposed on these defendants, these Nazi survivors, will be tested by whether the victors in the war adhere to the framework that we are judging the losers of World War II by. And that has not been sustained in the future. A brighter side of the Trump diplomacy, which was referred to by Helga in her opening remarks, is his appetite for some kind of positive relations with geopolitical rivals. And I think that the alternative idea that he has, and this is less destructive, I think, of the near future anyway, is some kind of compact between Russia, China, and the US that does away with internationalism and returns to a world of spheres of influence under geopolitical guardianship. That is not a world we look forward to, and it defies the ecological logic of a world order grounded in the love of humanity and the destiny of the planet being tied up with the unity of humanity. So that we are faced now with these challenges, both the short-term challenges of disengaging from this Iranian quagmire of sorts, where the efforts at diplomacy were repudiated in such crude language by the American president, who called the quite serious negotiating proposals of Iran a piece of garbage that was totally unacceptable, without making any kind of comparable response, and without any regard for the well-being and security of Iran. In other words, this was this recourse. When militarism fails, this recourse to geopolitical bullying compounds the destructiveness of militarism, and it creates a world where injustice becomes the vehicle of stability, so-called. And again, the reference to Israel-Palestine is pertinent, I think, as a model for this kind of bullying plus militarism as a path toward an imposed and deeply alienating and unjust stability. It is a horrifying prospect for the human future. And I would say that Iran has demonstrated a courageous resilience in the face of an aggression that is so hypocritical in its rationalization, supposedly objecting to Iran's nuclear program while hiding the reality of Israel's nuclear arsenal. How can a peaceful future for the region be established on that basis? Iran, along with the main Arab countries, has long favored a nuclear-free zone for the Middle East, which alone would free the region from this kind of hegemonic efforts to exert Western control. And in this sense, Israel is the partner of the West or a member of the Western alliance, and Iran is the main obstacle to that vision of hegemony. So that is what makes let me just conclude by saying that we're at this crossroads, and it's up to the people of the world, not the governments, to mobilize effectively in favor of a truly alternate vision of the future. Thank you very much. Forgive me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Thank you very much for this excellent organization, roundtable discussion, and inviting me and having an opportunity to meet some of my very respected colleagues like Richard Falk. The topic is very important, very strategic, very timely. In 2017, I wrote an article, Systemic Earthquake, in an e-journal edited by dear friend Richard Falk. That was the first year of the first Trump era. And I have predicted that the world is going through a systemic crisis, very comprehensive systemic earthquake, which will shaken all of the international structures. Unfortunately, today we are at the midst of this systemic earthquake. Why do we need an order, especially in economic relations? Economy needs order. Economic relations and progress needs order, as Helga has emphasized. We need the basic term of order is predictability. Without having a predictability, you cannot make a plan. You cannot establish a rule of order. So today, Trumpian diplomacy destroyed predictability. No company, no individual, no state today can predict, not next year, even next month, next week. I followed very closely President Trump's and Chinese President Xi's meetings. There were good, very pleasant wordings, but I don't think that Chinese side were convinced of the real intention of President Trump. Because last year he declared a trade war against China, and he has been using his terminology, his rhetoric every day. So today, international order and regional structures, they are all being shaken. The values, how we can see international order? First, the values, the common values, regardless of continents, economic development, etc., the basic values. As my dear friend Richard mentioned, all the basic values of humanity have been violated in Gaza genocide. And there was no real response from the leading powers. The global masses, peoples all around the world reacted to this genocide in Gaza. And we also have written a book with Richard on this. So when these values have been violated, there has been a widespread understanding that you can do anything you want if you have a power. There is no rule. There is no any criteria of you have to respect. And these values have been shaken. International system has been shaken. Westphalian system yes, yeah, I am back. Yes, I am back. There was an internet problem. So now, where are we facing today? I want to give three examples in last almost 6-7 years. The first one was pandemics. Pandemics, in fact, showed us the significance of traditional geopolitics, because the main problem of pandemics, global pandemics, and its impact on global economy was the issue of logistics and supply chain. And there has been a big threat to world population to transfer the basic needs of the peoples around the world. The second was Russia-Ukraine war. And I think it is a great success of Turkey that Turkey established a grain corridor during the war of Russia-Ukraine. And even the people, I mean the African people, African nations, they needed grain from Russia and Ukraine. But because of the war, it has been affected. Now, Istanbul Strait, Dardanelles Strait became the basic life stream for this grain corridor. Now I want to say, I have seen the maps of Helga. Please imagine certain trade routes, sea routes, and the straits from the north to the south. Istanbul, Dardanelles, Suez Canal, Bab el-Mandeb, Hormuz Strait, Malacca Strait, and several straits in Indonesian archipelago. So if you close these straits, the international trade will be collapsing. Today, Istanbul Strait, Bosporus was critical for grain corridor. Hormuz Strait is critical for energy corridor, but not only energy corridor. Some people think about natural gas and LNG, but I think Helga was very wise, right when she referred to fertilizers. Today, in many countries, there was not enough fertilizer to be put on the soil, and that will create a food shortage. So it is a big crisis. How can we overcome this crisis? Let me summarize my proposal as a solution to this, which was published in Project Syndicate 2-3 weeks back. I am following very closely as a former Prime Minister, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I have close contacts with almost all players in the region. Today we have four basic questions regarding the war. I don't want to say the war. It is an Israeli-American aggression against Iranian people. Not Iranian state only, Iranian cities, Iranian peoples, Iranian civilization. It was a shame for President Trump declaring that they will destroy all civilization. This is inhuman. This is barbarism. So, what are these for? The first and urgent issue is opening the Hormuz Strait. The second is nuclear program of Iran and how we can solve it. The third one is the proxy wars, what they call, but basically regional, the absence of a regional security architecture. The fourth, the mother of all problems in the Middle East is Palestine. Now, step by step, my proposal is this. First, Hormuz Strait. Iran has control over Hormuz Strait, and Oman is different from the other Gulf countries and having some sort of dialogue with Iran. And Iran has certain rights. Because of this war, it has been attacked without any UN Security Council resolution, without any verified reason of this. Yes, but Iran now is under pressure from many countries that they should open the Hormuz Strait because it is not only affecting Americans or Israelis, but it affects all the world affairs. Many developing countries are suffering as well, and I again agree with Helga. It is the cost of this war is trillions, not billions. So, on the other side, Americans wants to control this strait basically because of the strategic interest of Israel. Today, there is a clear contradiction between Israeli interests and American interests. And therefore, American public opinion is getting more and more suspicious about Netanyahu's war plan. Before Netanyahu, many Israeli prime ministers tried to convince American presidents to attack Iran, but they were wise not to follow these, adventurous calls. But unfortunately, Trump, because of this unpredictability, because of this egoistic approach, some sort of psychological problem, he followed Netanyahu's advice, suggestions. Now he is cornered. In China, can you imagine the basic global rival power? He begged from Chinese leaders to help him to open Hormuz Strait. And if it is closed, he even offered LNG to China. So he needs a solution as well. And most important, of course, the Gulf countries. This is not a war between Iran and US only. Another party is, the victims of this is Gulf countries. And of course, the absence factor is Israel. Now, my proposal to open the Hormuz Strait is like a Gordian knot of Hormuz Strait. If it continues under Iranian full control, that will be an excuse for Americans to attack Iran. If it is by military force, unimaginable, I don't think it will happen. If it is controlled by Americans, that will be a threat to Iran and to the region as a whole, because America means Israel, unfortunately. So there should be a third party for a temporary control of the Hormuz Strait, to open the strait in order to ease the pressures on the developing countries and other countries, especially regarding chain supply, energy supply. Who could be these states? I think such a group of states, not one state. Pakistan, I admire Pakistan's efforts to find a solution. I wrote letters to several leaders, including Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif, about this solution. They are doing very well, but one country cannot take this responsibility. My suggestion is for countries who have good relations with Iran, as confidence relations with Iran, and who has good relations with Gulf countries, especially with Saudi Arabia, and having some relations, dialogue, and some sort of convincing power over President Trump. These countries might be Pakistan, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Turkey. Pakistan, Indonesia, and Malaysia, they are Indian Ocean states, and Turkey, because of being neighbor to Iran, could play a role there. If these four countries guarantees Iran certain measures, about the absence of attack against Iran, I think these four countries, they are all members of OIC. They have all good relations with Iran. They have all very good relations with Saudi Arabia and Gulf countries. And three of them are members of Peace of Board of Trump, which I am against. And this is not Peace of Board, this is Board of Neocolonialism. But still, first, maybe we can see some benefit out of these. Three countries, Turkey, Pakistan, and Indonesia, are members of Peace of Board. They should say to President Trump that it is time now for a peace. We cannot afford war in our region, and we cannot afford another genocide in Palestine and Lebanon. So I think there is a chance they can take over this control to guarantee without any, supported by mandated by a UN Security Council resolution, until the other solutions being resolved, they can function some sort of a facilitating role over Hormuz Strait. Second issue is nuclear power. I fully agree with Richard. Throughout of my academic and intellectual career, I have always propagated nuclear-free region. If Israel has nuclear power, nuclear weapon, not only power, weapon, nobody can say to other countries not to have it. The best option is nuclear-free Middle East. If it is not possible, I was mediator between IAEA and Iran, and between P5+1 and Iran, and between United States and Iran, Barack Obama and Ahmadinejad as two presidents, supported by Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Brazilian President Lula. In 2010, we signed an agreement, Tehran Agreement. According to this agreement, enriched uranium would have been deposited to Turkey in exchange to fuel for peaceful nuclear program of Iran. This was the most viable solution for the crisis. And this was guaranteed by Barack Obama through a letter to the leaders of Turkey and Brazil. Unfortunately, United States didn't accept this. But that model is still there. Iran several times, from the time of Khomeini, they have, yeah, I am completing. Yes, I am completing, yes. Okay. Until now, Iran refused that they don't want, repeated they don't want to have nuclear weapon. This is an option. Third level is regional security architecture. There should be a new security mechanism between Iran and Gulf countries as the first layer. Second layer, there should be a new regional security architecture from Pakistan to Egypt, from Turkey to, Iran and all the Middle East. The fourth is the solution of Israel, the solution of Palestinian question. There should be an international pressure on Israel to respect UN Security Council and UN General Assembly resolutions, and without solving Palestinian question, without solving establishing a viable state of Palestine, there cannot be peace in the Middle East. That is basically the security architecture which I have proposed. And thank you very much for your patience. Thank you. No problem.
Well, I find the proposals by you, Mr. Doyu, extremely. Yes, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Extremely useful, because I think, if these countries you named, Indonesia, Malaysia, Pakistan, Turkey, cooperate, you represent already a very sizable part of the Muslim world. And I would just really suggest, why not take what you propose and add to what I was proposing about the Oasis plan? Because the business model of the Gulf states clearly is, damaged, to say the least. It was based on the idea that, you had a small establishment living in great wealth. Much of the labor was done by guest workers, and the whole project was protected by US bases, or so they thought. Now it has turned out that these US bases did not protect these countries, but became a liability. So, these countries have to rethink, what is their future. Israel has to rethink, as I said, in the IDF and the security services, there is a debate if the present policy is viable or leading to the potential destruction of Israel. Likewise, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, all of these countries are destroyed by previous interventionist wars. They need urgent reconstruction. Afghanistan, for example, after 20 years of NATO, was left in the worst humanitarian crisis on earth, according to the WHO. It's still not better. Iraq is still in shambles. Why not have the four governments you are mentioning, Turkey, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Pakistan, to suggest seriously to put a joint development perspective on the table? The Gulf states have enormous sovereign wealth funds, which they wanted to invest in some useful projects like recreating museums and other things, but also to have ski resorts in the desert, which I don't think makes so much sense. You could use the same money to invest in the well-being of the people, including the guest workers, whom they probably will need for the indefinite future, and build up a real economy for the benefit of all people. Also, that is, in my view, the only way how the conflict between Israel and Palestine can ever be overcome, because you have to have a model which serves the interest of each. And given the fact that it was mentioned by several people that we are in a systemic crisis, I think that model for the Middle East must really be applied for the whole world. I mentioned the Africa 2063 plan. Ukraine needs reconstruction. Before the war broke out, Ukraine could have been the bridge between Asia and Europe in the context of the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, maybe with the visit of Trump in China, and at least for now, good resonance between Xi Jinping and Trump, maybe that moment can be used to launch an initiative to really change the fate of the world. But bold action is necessary. So my concrete suggestion to you would be, can you not approach these four governments and suggest that your proposal and my proposal be joint?
Do you want me to answer, to respond? Yeah, I think I fully agree. The best way of peace is economic interdependency. There is no other way. You can sign peace plans, you can make many declarations, but the best way of peace is economic interdependency. Whenever you have an economic interdependency, nobody would be starting a war. So economic interdependency means development. French and German armies invaded Paris and Berlin for many centuries. When they realized that there is a need of a new approach after Second World War, they created a EU as an economic interdependency. Similarly, now we need to have regional economic development projects. When I was Minister of Foreign Affairs, I declared Mesopotamian economic integration process, Turkey, Iraq, Syria, and Iran. Also, another project was Levanten project, Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan. So today, one of the best model of regional economic cooperation was GCC and ASEAN. Unfortunately, today GCC is dysfunctional, and GCC as a total, they had certain agreements with Iran, like United Arab Emirates today attack Iran, but they had close economic ties. Now this system has fallen, has been destroyed by these attacks. I fully agree with you about American bases in Gulf. Yes, it is a liability, but I can assure you, Americans can declare that we are withdrawing our bases. What they will do, these bases will be national bases of the Gulf states, and United States will send some advisors, and will sell trillions of dollars of weapons, F-35 to these countries just to escalate. We should not forget this. They provoked Saddam against Iran, then they destroyed Saddam. So this logic of war is very dangerous. But I fully agree with you. Therefore, when I propose this, I made this proposal, I have sent letters to Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, in fact, 2-3 letters during this war, and even before the war, during the negotiations in Oman, I sent my suggestions to Iranian ambassador when he invited me to embassy, asking my opinion to be sent to President Pezeshkian, and I insisted that Iran should be around the table of negotiations, because the main reason of Trump is to win the midterm election, and therefore this should be. I also sent letters to Pakistani Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif, who is my close friend, to Anwar Ibrahim, Malaysian Prime Minister, he's also my very close friend, and Iranian and Indonesian President Subianto. And of course, I made this, sent this to Turkish president as well. I don't know how they react, but we have to be creative. We have to be creative. This is a deadlock. In deadlock, everybody wants to keep the status quo. In fact, those who are breaking the status quo can bring peace. And I just without taking the floor too long, I agree with you. With this, Iran has the right of compensation. When Iran says we need compensation, yes, there was no reason of this war, and United States, but the compensation should not be from Gulf states only, because Gulf states didn't decide for the war. They found themselves in a war. Who started the war? Israel and United States. Today, what I am scared is that, and I am to the Iranian ambassador from Mexico, I want to tell to him as well. And yesterday, I sent 2 video messages to 2 international conferences in Iran, sending my messages. Anytime Israel and United States may withdraw, or this may change the attention to another crisis points. In January, we were talking on Venezuela. There is no Venezuela today. They can make another attraction, but the crisis between Gulf states and Iran may continue there. Against this, there should be a new fund of cooperation, regional economic fund, let me say, to be beneficial of this new energy flow or the new system. And my suggestion to Iranian brothers as well, instead of just asking certain payments from the Strait of Hormuz, there should be a much more comprehensive economic plan to overcome this crisis. My friend, Iranian former Minister of Foreign Affairs Muttaqi, came to see me in Istanbul. He came to Eastern Anatolia by car, by bus or by car. From there, he used airplane. They said that many bridges on the way were destroyed. So Today, there has been a huge destruction in Iran. There has been destruction in Gulf states as well. Who is responsible for this? Clear answer is Trump and Netanyahu. And that, against these two people, there should be a regional belongings supporting each other. And I fully share your opinion, and we can bring these proposals together, a geopolitical solution framework, as well as a developmental visionary project together.
Un punto muy importante en este asunto.
A very important point in this matter.
Primero, antes que nada, agradecemos
First,
mucho al
before
canciller
anything else,
Davutoglu
I would like to thank Foreign Minister
por un
Davutoglu
análisis
for
correcto,
his correct analysis,
y al igual a los
and
otros panelistas
similarly,
participantes.
my thanks to the other panelists who are participating.
به این جنبندی برسه که با دبل استاندارد نمیشه دقیقت دنیا اداره بشه.
Yo creo que el mundo tiene que
I
llegar
think
a
that
esa
the world
conclusión.
has to reach this conclusion
No se puede gestionar
because you
el
cannot
mundo.
deal with a double standard facing the world.
همه تأمین بشه تا صلح و ثبات برقرار بشه.
Y obviamente la humanidad
obviously,
necesita
humanity
que se
needs
vean los beneficios de todo el mundo
to
para
see
que se pueda
benefits for
lograr.
everybody so that we can bring about peace.
آب باشه دوام نخواهد داشت.
Cualquier tipo de
Any
solución que sea
kind
bajo
of
presión,
solution
no va a
which is
tener,
done under pressure
permanencia.
is not going to be a lasting solution.
در برابر ظلم و ستم ابرقدرت‌ها سکوت کنن خودشون بیشتر هزینه بهت پرداخت کنن.
Los países si se quedan
The
en
countries,
silencio
if countries are
frente
quiet
de estos crisis,
before
este tipo
these
de
kinds of
desafíos,
crises and these kinds of
obviamente
challenges,
esos silencios se van a dañar
that
mucho más.
silence will be damaging to them as well.
میرسه به مواد غذایی و نکاتی که ممکنه قحطی جهانی پیش
Y
بیاد.
obviamente si se permanece
And
silencio,
obviously,
podemos llegar
if that
también
silence is
incluso a
continued,
escasez
we could even
de alimentos.
reach to a situation of shortages of food itself.
یک کشتی هستیم و اجازه ندیم هر کسی زیر پاشو بخواد سوراخ کنه.
Todos nosotros tenemos que llegar a
We
esta
all
conclusión
have to
y saber
reach this kind of
reconocer
conclusion
que
and
estamos en el
to
mismo
know
barco.
that we are all in the same ship. We are all passengers on the same ship. If we decide to drill a hole in the boat, it's going to be very bad for all of us.
بستگی داره به کی باشه. یعنی ما آدم خوب و بد داریم، تروریسم خوب و بد نداریم. به هر حال هر کاری که غیر قانونیه برای همه باید باشه.
Bueno, en este caso nosotros sí tenemos
So
una
in this
persona
case,
mala y
we
una persona
do
buena.
have
En
a
este caso
bad
no
character and a
tenemos
good
una terrorista
character,
buena y una terrorista, digamos,
but
que sea mala.
there's no such thing as a good and a bad terrorist. We know that they are the ones who are provoking this. They are the ones who are damaging all of humanity and Iran.
نمیتونه اسرائیل به بهانه هولوکاست خودش دقیقاً یه هولوکاست جدید درست
Si el
کنه.
Holocaust era algo
If-
desafiante, algo malo, pues
If the idea
tiene
of
que ser en todas las épocas y los siglos del mundo.
if
Ahorita
we're
estamos
to
viendo el
reach
día de
peace,
hoy
we
que
need to do this in every era and every part of the world. We see today that the Israelis are carrying out a Holocaust, just like the previous Holocaust was terrible.
که منافع همه دیده بشه.
Yo, mi opinión
My
es lo
opinion
siguiente, y
is
mi
as
sugerencia,
follows.
de
My
que si
suggestion
todo el
is that
mundo,
if the entire
busca la
world
coordinación, a través de ello
coordinates,
podemos llegar
through
a
that we can achieve peace.
Muchas gracias por
Thank
todas
you
sus
very much for all of your considerations.
دنیس اسمال که بنده رو دعوت کردن.
Agradezco especialmente
And I would especially like to thank Helga Zeplerush and also Mr. Dennis Small, who helped coordinate this roundtable that we're participating in.
Si nos permiten, como tenemos
If you allow us, since we also have another meeting, we are forced to say goodbye to you all today, right now, and we thank you. And truly, this was a real class for me, all of the analyses which have been presented today.
Thank you very much.
I wanted to comment briefly on one aspect of my friend Ahmet Davutoglu's very creative and important proposal of a multidimensional approach to this present crisis, and combined with Helga's developmental focus on the OASIS plan and the idea of creating a structure of mutual benefits derived from economic interdependence. My question to you, Ahmed, is you are, in a sense, in this, your first, the first part of your proposal, punishing Iran by removing its only effective measure, countermeasure, which we should remember is a non-military one, but it is one that has led to Trump, at least, seeking this off-ramp.
Mhm.
And there is no basis for trusting the international community to come to the rescue of Iran should Israel resume in another few months a further attack and an attempt to achieve regime change. So is it reasonable to expect Iran to forfeit its one means of effective protection without some corresponding tangible indication of a changed view of security on the part of the US?
Yeah. Thank you, Richard. You are always very creative and you are bringing new dimensions to all these issues. When I thought about this proposal, I also thought about how would be Iranian response. In my proposal, I said these 4 countries will take this mission in coordination with Iran, not just in coordination with Iran and Oman, because the other side is Oman. And a UN Security Council mandate should be given. In that UN Security Council resolution, there should be a clear guarantee that during this mission, there will be no attack against Iran, neither by US or Israel. This will not be a permanent solution. This will not be a permanent regime of Hormuz Strait. This will be just a temporary temporary solution, just to allow all the sides to negotiate on the matters for a sustainable system there. Otherwise,
would you trust that guarantee if you were an Iranian?
If there is no guarantee, then these 4 countries will withdraw and Iran will take over the Gulf, the Strait again. Iran will not use anything there. If US or Israel will not, fulfill their promises, okay, these 4 countries will say to President Trump and UN Security Council that if there is any single attack, if there is any single tension, they will withdraw their mission. And Iran, the status quo of today will come back. I remember when my mediation during Israel-Syria peace process in 2008, I put conditions to Israel and Syria, 2 conditions. One, to Israel, you will not do anything, any aggression in West Bank and Gaza. And I put condition to the Syrian side, you will not provoke anything in Lebanon. So for almost 8 months, when there was these indirect negotiations continue, there was a calm in Lebanon and Gaza. Similarly now, these 4 countries will say, if there is any single attack, aggression against Iran, we will not do this mission. And Iran is the only country controlling there. They will take over this strait again, and this status quo will prevail. But if we can, yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
1 minute. I would like to address all the panelists, but also those who are leaving now, that I would suggest that we take this result, what we have accomplished so far, which obviously is very preliminary, but nevertheless a concrete proposal, because in 11 days from now, there will be in the UN Security Council a special conference organized by China, who has the chair this month of the UN Security Council, to discuss the need to uphold the principles of the UN Charter. And I think given the fact that the whole world order is in disarray, maybe if we can agree from this panel to make a motion to the UN Security Council discussion to adopt what we are discussing here, then it may, catapult the whole discussion on a better level.
Thank you.
Estimada senhora Helga LaRouche,
dear Helga Zepp-LaRouche, and I would like to also send my greetings to all of the students, professors, and academics here. We have little time, and therefore I am going to synthesize my ideas. We are brought together on extremely important ideas, which goes beyond geopolitics, economics, and on a world scale, and the destiny of entire nations such as Brazil and others. I'm referring to the warlike escalation against Iran in the context of what some analysts have called the controlled disintegration of the world economy. These brief remarks, we would like to analyze some of the effects, negative policies of Donald Trump on Brazil, and we will defend the central role of the BRICS as a bastion of multilateralism, of global governance, and of resistance in the face of the arbitrary policies and geopolitical manifestations of Washington. But before that, allow me to state a hypothesis which has been gaining support in strategic circles, and that is that the government Trump doesn't act based on improvisation, on chaos alone, but rather a logic of controlled disintegration. What this means is to generate crises in regional economic areas, break supply chains intentionally, monetary fragmentation, and regional conflicts in order to reorganize the global order in behalf of financial interests in the United States and the military-industrial complex and the hegemony of the dollar. In this view, Iran has become, the war in Iran has become the central axis of this battle based on asymmetric attacks. This is not an accident. This is a tool by attacking Iran directly or doing that through Israel. The United States is seeking to disrupt the energy routes, the global energy routes, and deliberately raising the price of oil and natural gas to punish the developing sector economies or developing economies such as China, Germany, India, and others to force a financial flight towards the dollar and to weaken the processes of de-dollarization which are underway. And in that same way, to destroy any security architecture that is being built in Eurasia independently of the United States, including the axis of Russia, China, and Iran. So this is a world economy which is being subjected to induced entropy, imported inflation, technological fragmentation, military rearmament as a solution to the crises that have been artificially created. And Brazil, in all of this, where does it stand? What can Brazil, as a middle power in Latin America, is a neutral party, but it suffers from this greatly, these policies. First, the tariffs and the closing of markets, which hit the Brazilian economy very hard now. Secondly, the foreign exchange pressure which is being applied, which in the case of Brazil is aggravating poverty and is reducing the amount of money available for productive investment. Third, militarization of international relations on the hemispheric scale. Trump has pressured for Brazil to act as a privileged ally outside of NATO, but would require our automatic involvement in sanctions against Russia, China, Iran. Fourth, the attacks on Brazilian industry, the trade attacks on China, on Russia, aggravated also by Trump's policies, reduces Brazil's capability of dealing with its own valuable raw materials. In short, controlled disintegration, which is being orchestrated from from Washington, is converting Brazil into a collateral victim of an economic war that it did not select itself, but whose is paying for it through inflation, high interest rates, and loss of autonomy. In light of this terrible panorama, what are the alternatives that we have? Here, I want to be emphatic. The BRICS represent the main resistance force, institutional resistance force to the controlled disintegration policies. And on this, I'd like to make 4 additional points. First, the defense of real multilateralism. This is a necessity. The BRICS New Development Bank, today directed by Dilma Rousseff, is an alternative, a concrete alternative to the IMF and the World Bank. Number 2, the construction of global governance that is non-hegemonic. The BRICS are promoting a reform of the United Nations Security Council and to create a financial architecture that will allow nations develop through commerce. Third, resistance, the arbitrary tariffs. The BRICS have coordinated responses in terms of asymmetric tariffs of their own, developing their own trade channels and with new supply chains and mechanisms of industrialization for local markets. Fourth, the defense of peace and national sovereignty. In terms of the war against Iran, The BRICS have issued strong joint statements rejecting the military intervention and demanding respect for the nuclear agreement and establishing platforms for dialogue. As a final point, allow me to make a proposal. Brazil cannot limit itself to merely react before the tariffs or the Trump threats. It needs, de facto, to have a foreign policy that is an offensive one, that is strategic, that is sovereign, which is rooted in three principal pillars. Number one, strengthen of the BRICS as a political bloc, including the creation of a new system of payments based on national currencies and a stabilization fund, which would be against the current trade tariffs. Two, South American integration, Mercosur as a shield in light of the fragmentation of the hemisphere, which Washington is promoting. And third, active non-alignment in conflicts such as that of Iran. Brazil should offer to participate as a mediator, reject unilateral sanctions, and defend international rights. If Brazil passively subordinates itself to the controlled disintegration, it will also disintegrate if it acts within the BRICS as a developer of the global South. It can not only resist, but it can also contribute to the construction of a world multipolar order which is just and peaceful. I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, the war against Iran is not an isolated episode. It is an instrument and a policy of economic disintegration which has been orchestrated to perpetuate United States hegemony under Trump. Brazil has suffered a lot. The consequences of this policy, trade barriers, tariff, capital flight, loss of sovereignty. But in facing these threats, BRICS is a barrier, a defense of global governments and sovereignty and legal and economic resistance to the tariff policy. The question is not if Trump will try again and attack again. The question is if Brazil and other countries of the global South will have the political will to affirm and state their own policy and path. Mrs. Helga LaRouche, ladies and gentlemen, the moment is now. Either we actively integrate in the construction of a multipolar order, or we will be integrated by force in an order based on controlled disintegration under Donald Trump. Thank you very much. I will see you soon.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just transitioning off being an interpreter, and oops, I will start my video in one moment. I just have to close it out on the interpreting channel, and there we go. Okay, thank you very much. And I would like to, in particular, thank the comments from Professor Liarpides, because it actually serves as a transition to the topics which I wanted to address today centrally, which is the question of controlled disintegration. Now, let's jump right into this. We're suffering and we are seeing a massive dislocation of the world economy. There's no question about that. We're all aware of the fact that 20% of the world's oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz, 20% of the liquefied natural gas, 35% of fertilizers, and so on. What happened when the Strait of Hormuz was closed, not by Iran, it was closed by the war, the unprovoked war of aggression by the United States and Israel on Iran. That is what closed the straits. And the results of this have been fully predictable and known, and my argument is intentional. Now, let me just take two extreme examples to get the idea on this thing. Let's look at India. Extreme because it's the largest country in the world in terms of population, with close to 1.5 billion people. It is the number 3 oil consumer in the world. It imports 87% of its oil, and half of that comes through the Strait of Hormuz. In India, according to the reports I have read, the price of gasoline at the pump has not risen for consumers, whereas in the United States, it's gone up 50% in other places as well. Why? Because the government of India has taken the hit. It has taken the brunt of this, and the cost of imports of oil is expected to increase from $175 billion in 2025 to approximately $265 billion in 2026. Now, that was hopefully going to improve my video. Now, this is not something that is costless to India, because what we are going to be seeing, and this has been announced already, that these balance of payments difficulties that India is clearly facing because of this under the current system with these oil imports, with what has happened, is going to open the door to very significant financial warfare against India. And there will be a drive by the City of London and Wall Street to subject India to massive capital flight to try to force India into a position of submission. That is not going to be accepted lightly by India. I know we have a distinguished speaker from India who will tell us a lot more about this later, but I wanted to just give people an idea of largest country in the world in population. Now let's take the impact of this policy of controlled disintegration on a very small country in Central America, population 11 million people. 11% of the Honduran population has been forced into emigration into the United States already because of the economic devastation that country has been subjected to. Central America, including Honduras, imports 75% of the fertilizers that they use in agriculture. The price of those imported fertilizers has just gone up 50%. This is going to subject the situation in Honduras to unbearable pressure. 25% of the GDP of Honduras is remittances from foreign workers in the United States, that 11% of its population that's there. 32% of the Honduran population is under 15 years old. So just add it up and consider what is going to happen in Honduras. Pharmaceuticals, which all of Central America depends on. India produces 65% of the world's active pharmaceutical ingredients, which are used for manufacturing the antibiotics, the insulin, and the products which everyone needs. There is going to be none of this available to Central America in the immediate future. Same picture applies to Africa. But I wanted to give you what this looks like in a really big country and in a really small one. What we are dealing with here is a physical economic collapse of the entire world economy. The economy of the world is not money. If it's only money, you can wipe out $2 billion or $2 trillion or $2 quadrillion, and it doesn't matter. But you cannot do that with a living process like the physical economy. You can't simply cut off what is called a supply chain. I think that's a silly word, but you get the idea. You can't simply wipe out 20% of the oil or a third of the fertilizer. It produces an irreversible process in the physical economy like would occur with a living being. You can't simply cut out the heart from a person and expect the body to continue to live just because the weight of the heart is less than 1% of the total body weight. That is what we are facing today. We are looking at a massive physical and economic implosion of the sort that we have not seen since the New Dark Ages of the 14th century. $4 trillion, that's the least of it. That's just money. What we're really looking at is the destruction of the capabilities of sustaining up to 1 billion people planet-wide just with what's happened so far. And this is just the beginning. Now, the question that obviously comes to mind to all of us is, well, why is this happening? Didn't they realize that this would happen if they closed the Strait of Hormuz? Are they that stupid or are they that crazy? Well, I have a very simple answer. This was intentional. They knew it would happen, and they did it deliberately. And the question is not, are they that stupid or are they that crazy? They are both. The question is, are they that desperate? And the answer to that is a resounding yes. And their policy is that of controlled disintegration. Now, let me just sort of quickly give you an idea of what this policy actually is. And I'm going to refer to where some of this began. Let me first talk about Paul Volcker, because in a speech on November 9th, 1978, Paul Volcker, who was then the head of the Federal Reserve, his speech at the Fred Hirsch Memorial Lecture in Warwick University, England, Volcker cited a British economist by the name of Fred Hirsch, and Volcker said the following: "A controlled disintegration in the world economy is a legitimate object for the 1980s," close quote. And this is what Volcker did when he got into the Federal Reserve. By December 1980, he had raised the prime lending rate in the United States to 21.5%. As is documented in a study prepared by my colleague, Richard Freeman, written many years ago, the effect of 21.5% interest rates was a collapse on a per capita basis in the United States of machine tools by 45%, bulldozers 53%, automobiles 44%, steel 49%. This was intentional, and it was controlled disintegration. The effect of this on less developing countries, the third world, was a process which we have called banker's arithmetic. Interest rates were raised so high that the more third world countries paid, the more they owed. And this is what happened in the case of Brazil. In 1980, they owed $72 billion. Over the course of the next 20 years, more or less, till 1998, they paid $146 billion in interest payments alone. They paid more than double what they owed. And after that process was over, they hadn't paid off the debt. The debt had risen to $231 billion. In other words, $72 billion minus $146 billion is equal to $231 billion. That only happens under banker's arithmetic. Now, where did this policy really come from? It didn't come from Volcker. It really came from a study that was prepared by something called Project 1980s, launched by the Council on Foreign Relations of New York, which in 1977 published a 33-book series, one of which was called Alternatives to Monetary Disorder. The author was Fred Hirsch, the same Fred Hirsch who was the speech in honor of him was given by Volcker. Hirsch is the former editor of the London Economist, and he is the one who proposed in that study, which became the policy of the Carter administration, controlled disintegration. And he proposed it explicitly that this is exactly what was required. Now, Lyndon LaRouche had something to say about this whole policy of controlled disintegration. And I'm going to put a slide on the screen here with comments that he made. In fact, This was an open letter to Congress that Lyndon LaRouche wrote on October 16th, 1979, just a few weeks after Volcker got in. And LaRouche said the following: I herewith submit a demand for the prompt impeachment of recently appointed Fed Chairman Paul Volcker. In earlier public statements, Mr. Volcker has stated himself to be a supporter of a doctrine of controlled disintegration for both the United States and the world economy, measures which constitute an efficient effort to plunge the U.S. economy into misery, chaos, and confusion of the sort ultimately worse than the conditions experienced during the Great Depression of the 1930s. A depression is not necessary. Any official who adopts a policy of controlled disintegration of the United States economy is engaged in a treasonous undermining of our nation's overall security at this junction. Now, this whole approach did not come from the British in 1978. It came from way before, and it's called Malthusianism. And people will recall comments by Thomas Malthus in 1791, such as this one that I have on the screen, where he encourages the reduction of the population and, if necessary, as he said, court the return of the plague as a necessary means for reducing the population intentionally. This didn't stop with Malthus. Bertrand Russell said the exact same thing in 1951, which is one of the reasons Lyndon LaRouche called him the most evil man of the 20th century. And Russell, too, called for a Black Death to spread throughout the world. And more recently, Prince Philip, who you may recall is the father of the King Charles of the United Kingdom today. Prince Philip in 1988 said, the problem is that the more people there are, the more resources they'll consume, and that'll create pollution and so on. It would be better, he said, that we have an increase in disease, starvation, and war. In the event that I am reincarnated, I would like to return as a deadly virus in order to contribute something to solve overpopulation. My conclusion from this: we are not faced with an accident or a mistake. We are not faced with a resource war. We are looking at a population war with a policy of intentional demographic destruction to maintain control over the 2.4 quadrillion global speculative bubble. Just compare these two statements, that of Prince Philip in 1988, where he said, human population growth is probably the single most serious long-term threat to survival, I guess to his survival. We're in for a major disaster if it isn't curbed. Lyndon LaRouche was the exact antithesis of this entire Malthusian approach. And he said in 1983, man differs fundamentally from the beast. Man has the potential of reason, the power to make creative discoveries which advances scientific knowledge, and to convert such scientific advances into advances in technology. If at any time we stop technological progress, the society sufficiently foolish to do such a thing will condemn itself to die. And that concept I propose to you is the basis for resolving this crisis, this population war underway, of which Iran is one representation, to reverse the policy of controlled disintegration along the lines of the policies and programs which Helga has previously identified, and I'm sure we can discuss further in the discussion period. Thank you very much.
Good day to everyone. We are really living through some very dangerous times. Over the last 3 decades, wars have been much more frequent and much more widespread. The hopes we all had in the beginning of the 1990s, at the time of the ending of the Cold War, have all been dissipated. 2025 military spending is soaring at some $2.88 trillion United States dollars. It has been growing more and more every year over the last decade. Compare that to what it was in 1991 at the end of the Cold War, which was only $1 trillion, just over $1 trillion. That's more than 100% increase in this period. I know that we have approximated the cost of the Iran, US, Israel war costing some $4 trillion. But it doesn't speak of the terrible sufferings of the citizens, the descent into barbarism that we are witnessing before our very, very eyes. The cost to our environment, we can't begin to put a cost to that without the destruction of the thousands of buildings and other infrastructure that are being destroyed, with dust pouring into the atmosphere. The waste of the resources that took millions of years to be formed in our earth. I'm speaking about our oil and other type of mineral resources that we have. And what are the reasons for all of this? The desire by the ruling forces in the West, in particular the USA, for world domination. It is a colonial mentality that is still persisting in our time. Much of the great wealth is going towards world domination, spending towards the domination of the world. How else can we explain at a time of peace, you have 800 US military bases all over the world? The global South is seen as by those forces as just a huge source of raw material to benefit the ruling class in a very new imperialist state, in the very few imperialist states. When we talk about the resource curse, many people talk about the resource curse, and they speak about the Dutch disease, but there's another kind of curse. The moment you find any good resources in your country, you invite your country to be recolonized or be made once again into just a producer of raw material. No consideration is being given to the more than 300 million starving people in the world, the homeless. Indeed, the wars are creating more homelessness, more hunger, and more destitution than at any other time that we can think about. Imagine something must be seriously wrong with us, with the system that we live in, that we produce so much that can solve all the problems of hunger and poverty and homelessness. But instead of doing that, we are creating more and more of it. In both the developed and in the developing world, poverty is soaring, while the concentration of wealth remains at the top level. And many of the systems that we were speaking about today, particularly the just concluded speech by Dennis Small, points to the fact that the exploitation of people is benefiting fewer and fewer. The pyramid is getting narrower and narrower. And the mechanism involved in pumping money pumping resources from the South to the North. As I've mentioned at the previous meeting, the South is still a net exporter of capital to the North over the many, many years. In the Middle East, the United States sees Israel as its proxy to control the rich oil region that exists there. That is why it is spending billions to help Israel to keep expanding its borders to include almost the whole of that area. Over recent years, Israel has turned into a kind of a Frankenstein monster for the US. Its influence in the halls of power in the US is tremendous. A debate of who is the boss could very well be a very interesting debate to talk about. We know that it was Israel that pushed the US to join the attack against Iran because they have a president that seems not to be very much informed or educated about what is taking place in the world. This this is allowed it is the Israelis are allowed with the support of the United States to conduct a genocide in the plain view of the whole world. It sees as one of its main enemy medical workers, doctors, nurses, and journalists, people who expose the atrocities that are being committed all over. They target women, particularly young women of childbearing age in the Palestine, and people people who reproduce children, including babies, and they want to eliminate all of that. The US is hostile to any country or countries that offers any alternatives. As someone mentioned, alternatives are developing, but pretty, sometimes strongly, sometimes weakly. But that explains their attitude towards China. China is not seeking to compete necessarily with the United States. They are pursuing a line of win-win cooperation, of a development of the whole world, the infrastructure. But look at what recently happened in Panama with the United States pressuring the Panamanian government to remove a legitimate, ordinary commercial agreement because they want to push China out of our region, and under the grounds of China being a threat. No one is a threat to the United States. I have to be very clear about that. No one wants to fight with the United States. This is being used as an excuse. Look at what is happening in Cuba. Why is Cuba, even just now, recently, I just heard today that they have imposed another shipping blockade on Cuba. People can't send anything or buy anything. Cuba is going to find it almost impossible to export or import goods into its country. Why? Because it's offering an alternative way of life that the ruling classes cannot accept and they cannot allow to succeed. Therefore, Cuba is being targeted. And that is why today, more than ever, the world needs to stand beside Cuba. Cuba is not a failed state. Cuba is being made to fail by the kind of pressure that we are under. And why is Iran under attack? It's largely because it is supporting the national liberation movements within the Middle East, because we see the same tactics that is used in the Gaza is now being used in Lebanon, and to expand the borders, the living borders of Israel. And there is a deliberate attempt on the part, I heard some of the colleagues speaking about guarantees by the United Nations. But if you've been following the developments in the United Nations, the United States have been consciously, before Trump, trying to destroy international laws and international institutions so that they can do as they feel, because they see themselves as the most powerful country in the world, and they do not want any laws to limit their power, and so that they can do exactly as they right. This, while it seems to be a sign of strength, is also a sign of weakness on their part. It is a reflection of the decay that is taking place in the system that we live under. And not only a political degeneration, but a moral decay within the society itself. Unfortunately, the alternatives are rising too slowly and not cohesive enough. Even though BRICS at this point in time offers the best possibility for a better world and an alternative world that is taking place, if you look at the collection of people there, you will see that they're not very focused and very united on many of their issues. And that is the kind of weakness. So, for instance, India seems to have strong sympathies with Israel, and you have other countries some Arab countries that have allowed the genocide to take place in the Gaza. They are also part of the BRICS in those areas. Those are fifth columnists. I think the need for a more determined and forward-looking organization is very important. And I want to agree with someone who mentioned just now That is not now for governments only to take, where we can get governments to take a stance is very, very good. But we have to try to get the people to take a stand on this matter. And they will only do that if they're organized. And I think that is the big task facing those of us who wants to save our world from catastrophe, to organize a resistance to ensure that we have a better world. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, sir. I welcome all the reverend guests, and I welcome you all from the land of Mahatma Gandhi, who has always advocated the philosophy of non-violence. And today, see, the world is realizing it. It's a high time we still we can propagate this philosophy of non-violence. Now, coming back to this topic of Iran war and the controlled disintegration of world economy. Ladies and gentlemen, this war was already looming large on us. And the wise people had, or the nation had already anticipated that this war is going to take place at some place or the other for its own varied reasons, and we all know, and I'll come back to one of those points. This war had to come, whether in Gulf or somewhere in other portion of the world, but not certainly in the United States or nearby its nations who are in controlled relation with the United States. This all happened on 7th of October 23. Unfortunately, when the Hamas attacked Israel, and probably Israel was waiting or whatever, and this how it happened. I'll get back again. Am I audible now? No.
I think it's the same problem
I will
like
come
the
back
other
again.
day. If you turn off your loudspeaker.
Am I audible now? I'll come back again. After 5 minutes, if you allow me, I'll just fix it and come back again, please. Please, I'll come back again. I'll come.
You're very clear right now, Mr. Tripathi. It's very clear. So just go right ahead and continue. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Tripathi, can you unmute your microphone? We can see you, but your microphone is muted. Can you unmute, please? Okay, it sounds like there are some problems in him hearing us. Maybe, Dennis, the thing to do is to continue with our next speaker, and then we'll come back to him. Yeah.
Ja, wunderschönen guten Abend oder je nachdem.
I wish you a good evening or wherever you are. I'm happy to talk here again to this current situation about the industry in Schwedt, the oil industry. It's a petrochemical an enterprise. It was built in the 60s in GDR at the border to Poland. And this industry has produced until the Russian oil was stopped. It has produced treated the Russian oil from the Volga region. The pipeline was called Družba, which means friendship. Damn it. Anscheinend hat jetzt Internetprobleme.
Yes, it does appear that we have an internet problem.
Ist eingefroren.
His image is frozen. Well, since yes, he is back. Let's go to Mr. Tripathi at this point again and see if it works. Can you unmute your microphone, please? Whoops. They're both on and both have their microphones muted. Let's let Mr. Bornschein, can you please turn your microphone on? Okay, didn't know if you could see him.
Hallo, hören Sie mich? Okay. Nochmal beginning, or also nochmal von Beginn?
So, should I begin or?
Ich fasse mich kurz. Also, die PCK Schwedt bezieht zurzeit.
So, this industry in Schwedt is currently doing 6.5 million tons of oil from Rostock and Danzig in Poland. And also, until the 1st of May, 1 million of tons from Kazakhstan. This oil from Kazakhstan is important, that this must come from like the like this former industry.
This Russian
oil is in contradiction to the Arabian oil or other wells of oil. It has a high percentage of different ingredients, which is for heavy oils, including asphalt for streets necessary. But this did stop from this May on because Kazakhstan stopped to deliver it. And therefore, for the PCK, it is a petrochemical problem and also a production problem because most of the products are not delivered anymore, especially for the construction of streets and roads, but also for heavy oil, because most of the ships are driven by heavy oil, and therefore that is a problem, because most of the other refineries don't have enough capacities to produce that. And that means also for PCK that their money is declining, and especially in respect to the high prices which are needed to buy the heavy oil on the world market. The majority owner of PCK is the Russian company Rosneft, and PCK is under control of the German government. And the German federal government has last week made a guarantee for all the employees till the end of this year. But the employees of PCK are in a kind of strange situation. It is right now that there are about 1,200 employees, but also 2,000 employees at the surrounding construction sites, the pipeline construction and so on. And all these employees have high salaries, so therefore the city of Schwedt and others earn a lot of money by them, but since they do not know what their situation is in the next year, the insecurity will rise among them, and therefore I think that us from the Peace Initiative from Schwedt, we founded a community with them, that the company will be controlled, disintegrated during the next years. And it will be, they will not invest in new technologies and maintenance. They only wanted to keep the situation afloat. There are no new proposals to direct the whole construction site. Probably there will be built a campus to use that transformative process into something new, but that is not clear yet how it will go. And therefore we fear that in the near future only 300 to 400 employees will be employed there, and probably the double amount in the surrounding area. As I already said, is that in autumn of this year, the insecurity will rise among the employees, and at some point the federal government has to come out with some clearance that the company will not be held in that way, or that it might be diverted into military production site to produce military equipment and so on, even airplanes. In the city council, we are also represented, and we will put there an initiative. Schwedt equals the standpoint of peace. We already put something in there that we want to use a flag, a peace flag there, and we wanted to have the result that the city of Schwedt will develop into a peace town, but this is still up into the open. In respect to how much of the production is still be used, the different kinds of oil sorts will come in there. except from Kazakhstan, Sweden receives between 0 and 5% of the whole oil from the Arabian countries. That means that it is not affected by the delivery chains of the Iran war, but it profits on the one side from the high prices, but on the other side, the insecurities come into that situation also. As I already said, we have the fears that it will be downgraded or it will be changed into a military production site, or will produce fuel for rockets and fighting drones. We are against that, and we wanted to bring that initiative into the city council, and we'll hope that the city of Schwedt will promote that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, sir. And once again, I welcome all the. Am I audible now? So, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So again, again, welcome all the August gathering from the land of Gandhi. And what I was saying, this war was already looming large on us, and the world knew it. It was only we were just trying to buy some time, and the perpetrator of this war were waiting to do it. And this chance came to them, I'm being very candid, on 7th of October 2023, when unfortunately Hamas raided Israel. And then Israel already wanted some reason and they went ahead. And why US joined? Because we all know for long dollar was already under question. The legitimacy of the dollar as a world currency was already under question and under shroud. And US was already having a fiscal deficit up to 5.9%, which was very high and would have gone into a spiral. And as far as it was spiraling high, which was already told by our previous guests. I wouldn't touch much on that. But coming back to this, the topic of this Iran-US war and the world disintegration, of controlled disintegration of world economy. Now, US and Iran and Israel both have attacked. Israel has got the major winner out of this war. And now the complex issue which is encompassing it is on 5 points. That is economical, political, cultural, geopositional, and religious. The economical is, we all know, these all countries, they want to have safeguard their currency. And then fiscal deficit was already rising high post-COVID situation. So they wanted to take focus of the world to a different issue and their own population to a different issue. This war gave them the chance. And the political issue was already there. Then the culture, which will always exist, the supremacy for the culture. And then the geopositional, Israel is the gainer, Israel has already gained. And now, and coming back to the disintegration part, when we are talking about it, in future, it might come that a state might ask the dollar to be pegged against some cryptocurrency, and which they have already started by taking over the bitcoins and others. So that all the countries will have to see it. Now coming back to our country, how we are controlling it, the previous speaker had spoken, our Prime Minister has already been harping upon the Make in India. And most of the countries should do it. If you make your internal economy stronger, the overlay of the Forex, that is foreign exchange, is controlled. And then a wise expenses of the internal economy is controlled and the Forex is controlled. This is how the countries, as of now, we can safeguard ourselves, which I would suggest to other countries where the price of gasoline is going high. The government will have to take the hit the way Indian government has been taking it, which has been praised by the earlier speaker. So, and who are the gainer out of this war? I would say Israel is the clear gainer. America, the US did not anticipate that Iran will come back strongly, which was actually not anticipated, and it has come back, and it is a stalemate now. And I would submit that we all should agree to this thing, that this stalemate should be broken somehow so that the world can move ahead. We have already seen the COVID problem, and this is, again, it has been coupled with this present situation. So in all, Israel and US should take a step back. And the most intriguing part was the silence of the most important nations who would have mattered, like China and other European Union countries, who could have come forward and would have tried to diffuse this stalemate and the situation, which has not been done so. So I would suggest, thus, keeping this Iran-US war into account, a stalemate should be broken, Iran should also bow down, and the Strait of Hormuz for the rest of the world should be open. Otherwise, the coming situation is going to be from bad to worse. Thank you.
Well, I think that what Dennis Small was bringing up in terms of the intention behind what is happening, I think that that is definitely something which I think would be very useful for everybody who is concerned about peace to be investigated. And this concept of the controlled disintegration, we followed this very closely in the 80s when McGraw-Hill, the publishing house, published altogether 30 books on the topic. I think that clearly, these books clearly reveal the Malthusian intention. For example, there was one book in the series which was called "To Prevent the Reoccurrence of Cameralism," or no, it was basically to prevent that cameralism would unite with socialism. And what they meant by that is that they should never be allowed to have another Japan anywhere in the global south, because that was regarded as a complete violation to their Malthusian principles. So I think it definitely is worth to review this project of the 80s, because I do think that the Malthusian policy is like what my late husband always called the slime mold. A slime mold is a mushroom which comes back again and again, and each time it changes its colors, but it still is a mushroom. So I think that definitely is an element in the situation. I mean, otherwise, I want to congratulate Mr. Bornschein for this idea to turn Schwedt into a peace city. And maybe that is something we can also pick up and suggest to other cities who are threatened with a similar danger, that their production facilities are being transformed and retooled into military production. I mean, we were campaigning many years ago to retool the bankrupt auto industry into useful farm machinery, build tractors, not weapons. And now they're doing the exact opposite. Even in the most incredible thing is that the city where the Peace of Westphalia was meeting, or one of the two cities for 4 years, Osnabrück, I think Pistorius was the mayor of Osnabrück, and he is now the key warmonger in the German government, or one of them. And also, I think in Osnabrück they have all kinds of pro war policies. They turn a VW plant into a plant for tanks. So I think this idea to encourage cities to become peace cities and have the citizens have a word in what happens with the fate of their city is definitely some laudable idea which we should spread around.
You should be able to hear me. Any
Yeah.
problem? Am I good? Okay. Yeah, I think what people were hearing in the background was a fire alarm. We heard that there was going to be a test near the studio. So don't worry, it is not nuclear war that has begun. It's just at least not yet. It was a fire alarm test. Yeah, I have a comment and a question to add to yours. The comment, just to pick up on this idea that Malthusianism has been an ongoing policy and explicitly stated one. Kissinger's National Security Study Memorandum 200, completed on December 10th, 1974, but not made public till much later, stated, as Dennis Speed was just saying, and these are quotes, "We have to provide assistance for population moderation in various countries." In other words, reduce the population. The countries that they name are India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nigeria, Mexico, Indonesia, Brazil, the Philippines, Thailand, Egypt, Turkey, Ethiopia, and Colombia. And I'm sure that since that was written, Iran has been added to that de facto list. And what the document says, just to put it in their own words, Kissinger's words, the real problems of mineral supplies, which the West needs, lies not in basic physical sufficiency. In the extreme cases where population pressures lead to endemic famine, food riots, and breakdown of social order, those conditions are scarcely conducive to systematic exploration for mineral deposits or the long-term investments required for their exploitation. Close quote. I'll translate that into the normal English language. They have the minerals. If we let their population grow, they're going to want to use the minerals. We're not going to let that happen. We want those minerals. Therefore, we will reduce their population. That's a fair translation. Now, the comment that I had was to, again, just to bring this controlled disintegration policy question directly home to the present. It's not just Kissinger. It's not just the Project 1980 studies of the Council on Foreign Relations. It's not Parson Malthus and Russell and Prince Philip and so on. The top economic advisor to President Trump, the head of the Council of Economic Advisors, Steve Miran, he was the head of the CEA until a few months ago when Trump put him on the Federal Reserve Board to try to ram through a policy of lower interest rates, which didn't work. But as head of the Council of Economic Advisors, Steve Miran developed something which he called the Mar-a-Lago Accord. This was modeled on the idea of earlier agreements, which Kissinger and others had pushed through. And it consisted of the following. Miran, mind you, is a Harvard graduate. He also comes out of Fidelity Investment and the Hudson Bay Capital Group. So he's a representative of the speculative groupings, otherwise known as the Epstein class. And he had a 4-point policy proposal. Tell me if any of this sounds familiar. Number one, have a forced devaluation of the dollar to deliberately deflate the debt of the United States, because if you have big inflation, the dollar is worth much and much less. And if you devalue the dollar, $1 trillion today is worth tomorrow $1 billion. So you devalue the dollar and deflate the debt, number one. Well, that hasn't really worked too well. The last time I looked, it was $39 trillion, the United States debt. Now, I admit that was last week, so it may well have reached $40 trillion by now. Number two, raise tariffs to the rest of the world very substantially with the idea, Miran said, of increasing manufacturing in the United States, because if the foreigners, we don't let them send their stuff in, we'll have an increase in manufacturing here. Well, how's that one going? The tariffs have gone up and up, but manufacturing in the United States, over 11 of the last 12 months, employment in manufacturing in the United States has dropped. So manufacturing is collapsing as a result of this brilliant policy. Number three, Miran said, since the dollar will become so dominant worldwide, what we should do is we should sell treasury bonds for 100 years. In other words, what he called century bonds. Now, who in the world is going to invest in any country's century bonds, let alone the United States under this crisis? But that's what he proposed, and he thought that people would do this, and therefore you could stretch out the treasury debt for 100 years, so you have to worry about the rapidly rising payment of interest on that debt, which, by the way, is now more than $1 trillion a year. Well, how did that go? Not so good, because what's happened with the treasury debt is that the United States has been forced to sell shorter and shorter treasury bonds, to the point where it's like a churning machine.